You finally got the house. You beat out 5 other buyers, stretched your budget, and started celebrating. Then, 3 or 4 days later, you're standing in a dark basement while a home inspector points a flashlight at a crack in the wall and says, you might want to have that evaluated. Suddenly, your dream home feels like it's a $100,000 disaster. Today, I'm going to explain why that panic happens, what buyers in Northern Virginia tend to freak out about, what actually deserves your attention, and how to survive the inspection without losing your mind or losing the house. I've been practicing real estate in Northern Virginia for more than 2 decades, and I have attended inspections in just about every kind of property that we have here, including Old Town row houses, Arlington colonials, Falls Church ramblers, Annandale split levels, Springfield townhouses, McLean luxury homes, and high-rise condos throughout the area. The houses change, the panic usually does not. The home inspection is often the point where buying a house stops feeling exciting and starts feeling very real. Up until then, you're thinking about the kitchen, the commute, the backyard, the school district, and where your furniture will go. Then the inspector arrives and starts opening the electrical panel, testing the outlets, climbing into the attic, running water, examining the roof, and looking at the foundation. The home stops being a lifestyle decision and becomes a collection of things that can break. And that is when buyers start thinking, wait, I'm going to be responsible for all of this? That's what this video is really about. Not just roofs, furnaces, and cracks. It's about why otherwise rational people lose perspective during the inspection process, especially in Northern Virginia, where the homes are expensive, the housing stock is old and varied, and the price of the house does not always match the age of the systems. Later in this video, I'm going to explain the 3 kinds of inspection findings that should genuinely slow you down, and the kinds of findings that buyers lose sleep over, even though they're often routine. A home can have defects without being a bad home. If you're buying or selling in Northern Virginia, subscribe to my YouTube channel. I talk about the real experience of buying here, including the parts that do not show up in the listing photos. A modern home inspection report today can easily run 70, 80, or even 100 pages long. It may have dozens of photographs, red arrows, warning symbols, and phrases like further evaluation recommended, potential moisture intrusion, near the end of expected service life, unable to determine the full extent. Now, this report may be completely accurate, but to a nervous buyer, it can look like a crime scene investigation. A loose outlet gets a photo. Missing doorstops get a photo. A cracked line of caulk in the shower can get a close-up picture that fills an entire page. By the time the buyer gets to page 60 of the report, they are no longer thinking, this inspector is thorough. They're thinking, this house is falling apart. I've seen buyers become more frightened by the length of the report than by the actual findings themselves. That's a mistake, because a long report does not necessarily mean a bad house. Sometimes it simply means that the inspector documented everything. Is there an active leak? Are there safety concerns? Is there a major system in the house that's failing? Or is this report mostly describing normal wear and tear, maintenance, age, and a handful of small repairs? You should not lose sleep over a loose outlet the same way you would over a serious foundation concern. But buyers often do because inspection anxiety builds one item at a time. No single item is necessarily alarming, but after hearing 20 imperfect things in a row, buyers can start to feel like the whole house is defective. Instead of careful analysis, that becomes emotional overload. Later in this video, I'm going to come back to 3 phrases in inspection reports that sound frightening, but often need more context before you panic. One of the biggest reasons that buyers panic is that they judge an older Northern Virginia home as though it should behave like new construction. But that's not realistic. A 1940s brick colonial in Arlington is not going to feel like a new townhouse out in Ashburn. In an older home, the electrical system may have been updated through several stages, and the plumbing may reflect several generations of work, and the chimney may need some more maintenance. Now, this does not mean that you ignore the legitimate problems. It means that you understand the kind of property that you're buying. Northern Virginia has an unusually broad mix of housing. You can drive 15 minutes and pass a 19th century townhouse, a 1960s split level, a 1980s colonial, a high-rise condo, and brand new construction. Each one has different strengths, different risks, and different inspection expectations. I've seen older homes that were remarkably solid. I've also seen beautifully renovated homes where the kitchen looked fantastic, but the workmanship behind the finishes was somewhat questionable. New does not always mean well built, and old does not always mean defective. In Northern Virginia, a large part of the price may be the land, the school district, the commute, the neighborhood, or proximity to DC. You're not always paying for new systems. Sometimes you're paying for location. And that can be emotionally difficult for buyers to accept because they think, how can $1 million house need a roof? $1 million in Arlington does not automatically buy a luxury home. Many times it buys a fairly ordinary older home on extremely valuable land. One of the phrases that causes the most anxiety is this: near the end of its expected service life. So the home inspector says that the furnace is older. The buyer hears it is broken. Those are not the same thing. An older furnace may run for several more years, and a newer furnace may fail unexpectedly. Age matters because it helps you plan and to budget, but it doesn't tell you the exact day that the system will stop working. Same thing is true with windows in a house. One fogged window does not mean that every window in the house needs to be replaced. A failed seal is a defect, but it's not necessarily a crisis. One damaged window is different from 20 deteriorated windows with rot, leakage, and poor operation. You have to understand the scale of the problem. While buyers sometimes panic about small things, they can also underestimate the quiet issues. Water is one of the biggest. Water can cause far more damage than many of the things that buyers immediately focus on. A loose cabinet door is obvious. Poor grading is not very exciting, but grading that sends water towards the foundation can matter much more. A scratch on the refrigerator is annoying. Improper flashing around a roof or addition can become very expensive. A cracked bathroom tile gets immediate attention. A slow leak behind the wall may matter far more. Myself and inspectors, we pay close attention to active leaks, foundation intrusion, improper grading, downspouts, dumping water beside the house, roof flashing, plumbing leaks, and signs of repeated moisture. A water stain may be evidence of an old leak, or it may be active. Looking at a stain does not tell you the whole story. Instead, you need to ask, is it wet now? Is there elevated moisture? What caused it? Was the source repaired? The buyer should not ignore the stain, but the buyer should not create a horror story before anyone knows what caused it. I once worked with Northern Virginia buyers who became extremely nervous when the inspector pointed out a foundation crack. The photograph looked terrible. It was close up. It was a big red arrow, and the report recommended further evaluation. The buyers were already talking about walking away from the purchase. They were imagining major structural repairs before we had any real information. So we brought in the appropriate expert. The crack turned out to be stable and manageable. What looked like a possible deal killer in the report became a straightforward maintenance issue. That doesn't mean that every foundation crack is harmless. Some absolutely deserve very serious attention. But before you let one photograph ruin your week, get the correct expert and understand what you're actually dealing with. That is one of the biggest lessons in the inspection process. Get the right expert. Sometimes spending a few $100s on a structural engineer prevents a buyer from walking away from a manageable situation. It can also protect a buyer from moving forward with a very serious problem. I think one of the deepest reasons that buyers panic has very little to do with the actual defects themselves. It's the moment that they realize that they're about to become the landlord. When you rent and the air conditioning stops working, you call somebody. When you own the house, somebody calls you. When the water heater leaks, it is your responsibility. When the basement smells damp, you have to figure out why. When the roof needs work, you have to find the contractor. That shift can feel enormous, especially for first-time buyers. The inspection becomes the moment when the buyer realizes, I am not only buying the home, I'm buying responsibility for the home. I have seen numerous buyers fixate on a small item because it represents something much larger. The old furnace becomes, what if everything breaks right after closing? And the loose railing becomes, what if I'm not ready for home ownership? The inspection brings those fears to the surface. Sometimes buyers mistake emotional discomfort for evidence that the house is wrong. However, the next house is going to need maintenance too. It may have different issues, but it will still be a house. Even new construction has defects. There's no home where nothing ever breaks. Some buyers assume that a brand new home does not need an inspection because it's new. It passed county inspections, has a builder warranty. What could possibly go wrong? Plenty. I've seen new homes with drainage problems, missing insulation, incomplete caulking, electrical defects, plumbing leaks, HVAC issues, roof damage, improperly installed appliances, and unfinished work. New construction involves many tradespeople working under tight deadlines. Things get missed. A county inspection is not the same as a detailed inspection performed for the buyer. The new cabinets and spotless walls can actually make buyers less critical because the house looks perfect. Beautiful finishes do not guarantee that everything behind them was completed correctly. New does not mean flawless. The home inspector matters. You want someone thorough, but you also want someone who can explain all of their findings in proportion. A good home inspector should be able to tell you the difference between a safety concern, a major defect, routine maintenance, and an aging component. You also want someone familiar with Northern Virginia housing. An inspector who regularly works in Alexandria and Arlington may be more comfortable with older masonry, historic construction, unusual additions, and homes that have been updated in stages. An inspector who works regularly in high-rise condos may better understand the difference between what belongs to the unit owner and what may fall under the condominium association. The best inspectors that I know are calm and direct. They don't minimize serious issues, but they also don't turn every discovery into a dramatic reveal. A good inspector might say something like, "The system is older, but it's operating today. I cannot tell you exactly how long it will last, so you should budget for a replacement." That's useful information. Saying, "This thing could die at any time," may be technically true, but almost anything in a house can fail at any time. The buyer needs more than a warning. The buyer needs context. Ask the inspector what kinds of homes they inspect regularly. Ask what is included in the inspection. Understand the limits of the general inspection. A general home inspector is not a structural engineer, electrician, roofer, chimney specialist, mold professional, or sewer contractor. If a concern goes beyond the general inspection, bring in the right person at that time. There are 3 phrases that show up in home inspection reports and make Northern Virginia buyers nervous. The first is end of expected service life. And that doesn't mean that the system is broken. It means it's older and should be part of your future budgeting. The second phrase is recommend further evaluation. That doesn't automatically mean that the inspector found a major problem. It may mean the issue falls outside the inspector's expertise or cannot be fully evaluated during the inspection. And the third phrase is monitor. That usually means the condition is not necessarily urgent, but that it should not be forgotten. None of these phrases should be ignored. However, they should not automatically be translated into walk away from the house. The phrases that deserve much more immediate attention are things like active leakage, evidence of movement, unsafe electrical conditions, major structural damage, significant water intrusion, or a system that's not operating. Even then, the next step is usually to understand the scope and cost before making a decision. This happens constantly. Buyer finishes the inspection and calls their parent. Parent lives in another state. Parents did not attend the home inspection. They didn't hear the explanation from the home inspector, and they've never seen the house. The buyer says, the inspector found a foundation crack, moisture, an old roof, and electrical issues. The parent says, walk away immediately. Now, the buyer is panicked all over again. Family members are usually trying to protect the buyer, but they're reacting to a condensed, emotionally loaded version of the findings. A close-up photo can make a tiny crack look enormous. A relative sees the word moisture and imagines the entire house is filled with mold. They hear old roof and assume water is pouring into the attic. Now, of course, family advice can be useful, but it should be based on the actual facts. I've seen buyers become comfortable after speaking with the inspector and a specialist, only to become terrified again after texting a few selected photos to somebody hundreds of miles away. Don't let the person who's never seen the property become the loudest voice in the decision. Inspections can also reveal differences between partners. One buyer grew up in an older home and sees repairs as normal, and the other has always lived in apartments and finds every maintenance issue alarming. One buyer is focused on the location, while the other is focused on the condition. One sees potential, the other sees a future list of expenses. And these differences may not show up during the showing of the house. They often appear during the inspection. I've watched one spouse become even more attached to a home while the other starts looking for a way out. The inspection does not create that conflict, but it exposes it. That's why buyers should talk about their tolerance for repairs before making an offer on a Northern Virginia home. Would an older roof make you uncomfortable? Are you prepared to replace an HVAC system in the next few years? Will you have necessary financial reserves after closing? Once the home inspection report arrives, some buyers want the seller to repair everything. That's usually not the strongest negotiation strategy. A request with 30 items can make the buyer look unreasonable and bury the issues that actually matter. The active roof leak gets listed next to a loose doorknob. Electrical concerns get listed next to a missing screen. And the plumbing problem gets listed next to a cracked refrigerator shelf. These things are not equal. Strong inspection negotiations should focus on meaningful concerns. Things like safety, structure, active water, major systems, material defects that were not obvious when the offer was made on the house. Now, this doesn't mean that small items never matter, but it means you have to set your priorities, because sellers get emotional too. They may have lived in the house for 20 or more years. The sellers may believe that they took good care of the house. Then they receive a long repair request that sounds like an accusation that the home is terrible. You can advocate firmly without insulting the property or exaggerating the findings. In my experience, a calm, focused, well-documented request is usually much more effective than an emotional demand. I do bring the analytical habits of my former legal career to these negotiations, and I'm representing the client as their real estate broker, not acting as their attorney or providing legal representation. My role is to help the buyer understand the inspection findings, evaluate the practical impact, and negotiate within the terms of the real estate contract. What does the buyer reasonably need in order to move forward? That is much more useful than simply saying or asking, how much can we get? When I review an inspection with a buyer, I try to create perspective. What needs immediate attention? What needs another expert? What's working but aging? And what is ordinary maintenance? And what is cosmetic? One of the biggest mistakes that Northern Virginia buyers make is calculating the cost of making every older component brand new. They might see older roof, older windows, an older water heater, an older HVAC system, and a deck that needs some maintenance. So they calculate the cost to replace everything. Suddenly they decide that the house needs $80,000 worth of work. That may not be accurate. The roof may have several years left. Perhaps only 2 windows have failed seals. And the water heater may be working normally. The buyer has calculated the cost of making the house perfect, which is not the same as the cost of correcting some meaningful defects. Not new does not mean broken. Most homeowners do not replace every aging component on the day they move in. They budget, they maintain, they replace things over time. That is home ownership. Depending on the issue, the negotiation may involve a repair, a credit price adjustment, documentation, or further evaluation. Sometimes a credit is better because the buyer controls the work after closing and chooses their own contractors. Sometimes the seller needs to make the repair, sometimes the buyer should accept the condition, and sometimes the right decision is to walk away. There's no single answer for every transaction. There are home inspections that uncover serious problems, significant structural problems, extensive water intrusion, major concerns, dangerous electrical work, badly damaged sewer line, several major systems near failure, combined with a buyer who has no reserves left after closing. Perhaps a seller who refuses to address significant findings. A buyer should not move forward just because they love the house, because sometimes the risk is too high. Sometimes the numbers no longer make sense. Sometimes the uncertainty cannot be resolved during the inspection period. Walking away can be the right decision. But the buyer should walk away because the facts changed, not because the home inspection report was long, not because the furnace is old, and not because the inspector found normal maintenance, and not because the responsibility of homeownership suddenly feels uncomfortable. Most of what I've discussed so far applies to detached homes and townhouses. But if you're looking at one of Northern Virginia's many high-rises in Roslyn, Tysons, Arlington, or parts of Alexandria, the panic looks a little different. Condo buyers need to understand that the inspection is only part of the due diligence. A home inspector can evaluate many accessible systems inside of the condo unit, but the buyer also needs to understand what belongs to the owner and what belongs to the condominium association. Windows may be the owner's responsibility in one building and the association's responsibility in another. The HVAC system may be private, partially shared, or part of a central building system. The roof, exterior walls, balconies, plumbing risers, elevators, and major mechanical systems may be common elements. A beautifully renovated condo inside a poorly funded building may carry much more financial risk than a loose faucet inside the unit. That's why the condo documents, reserves, budgets, special assessments, meeting minutes, insurance, and pending projects matter so much. The inspection tells you about the physical condition of the unit. The documents help tell you about the health of the building. Now, during the inspection, go in expecting the inspector to find things. That's their job. You should go to the home inspection, ask questions. Ask whether something is active, urgent, expensive, common, or mostly a maintenance item. Do not make your final decision while standing in the basement staring at a crack. Let the home inspection finish. Read the report. Talk with the inspector. Bring in specialists where needed. Get estimates when appropriate. Then evaluate the home as a whole. Don't forget why you wanted it in the first place. The location still matters. The commute still matters. And the neighborhood still matters. The lot, layout, schools, walkability, and long-term value are all important. The inspection should add information to the decision. It should not erase every other factor. The home inspection is often the moment when the fantasy of the house ends and the reality of ownership begins. You might leave the home inspection less excited than when you arrived. Maybe you look at the report and wonder whether you are making a mistake. You might suddenly feel the weight of the mortgage, the repairs, and the responsibility. That doesn't mean that the home is wrong. Take the findings of the home inspection seriously, but don't treat every finding equally. Understand the age and style of the property. Focus the home inspection negotiations on meaningful concerns. Don't ask, is this house perfect? No house is, so it's not. The better question is, now that I understand the imperfections, does this home still make sense for me? And sometimes the answer will be no. Sometimes the inspection will reveal a risk that you should not accept. But oftentimes the answer will be yes, the home has issues, but they're understandable, manageable, and consistent with what I am buying. That's not ignoring the home inspection. That's using it correctly. I've helped buyers throughout Northern Virginia, in Alexandria, Arlington, Falls Church, McLean, Springfield, Annandale, Fairfax, navigate inspections, specialist evaluations, and repair negotiations. If you're preparing to buy here, reach out to me. My email is brian@brianblock.com. You can call or text me at 703-626-0715. And if this video helped you, subscribe to the channel. This is also the kind of video that I would send to a buyer the moment their offer is accepted. The best time to prepare for inspection panic is before the inspector turns on the flashlight. The goal is not to find a home with absolutely no problems. The goal is to understand the problems before the home becomes yours. I'm Brian Block. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.